You fixed that!
We're good.
Good for you. So the Post-Gazette is doing this series. I guess it started Sunday. And it's about access to health care in this region. And specifically access to health care when you are not rich. And not even maybe middle. And it is so unsettling. I mean, it's not as if we don't know some of this stuff vaguely in the back of our heads, but having it put together as it has been by Sean Hamill and the other reporters who are working on this is, I really hope that you do read it. Maybe with a stiff drink in your hand, which I did not have, obviously, this morning. Because it was really... And then there's all the other news. I mean, it's just like bad. So it's hard. I'm going to get back to this healthcare in the region a little bit later in the program. It's hard right now. I always hearken back to that scrap of poetry that sticks in my head. The world is too much with us. So here's some good news. For the first time in history, the average American, whoever that might be, the average American is now more likely to live in a state that recognizes same-sex marriage. Yay. The average American. And so even though most of the states do not yet recognize it, the fact is that a lot of the states that don't recognize it are those states in which cows outnumber people, 100 to 1. So in the most populous states, generally speaking, there is recognition either legislatively or judicially gotten. And so that's some good news. And believe me, I'm looking for it. Can I'm afraid to do this, but I'm going to. There's a story, and I don't know what this says about me, that I don't get it. But maybe I'm not understanding it. I also, mea culpa. Remember Friday when Chris Potter was on the show? And I was saying that story about the psychiatrist shooting the guy who's shooting him. It drove me crazy because they talked to the extraordinary thing in the piece was that this doctor had a gun in his office, and he took down the guy, didn't kill him, but actually just disabled him enough. But then the story noted that someone had been killed. A 56-year-old woman, a caseworker, had been killed and the story did not say who killed her. Was she killed in crossfire? Was it from the doctor's gun? Was it from the guy's gun? And Potter and I went off on some, rant about blah, 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 yada, da, da, da. And I suspected that, the doctor might have killed her. Well, he didn't. And I need to say that my knee-jerk reaction, because I didn't want the NRA crowd to have this as, an exhibit for their side, which now they do, which is that because the doc, going against hospital rules, by the way, because the doc had a loaded gun, he was able to save his life, certainly, and according to the police, they feel the lives of many others, since this other guy had more ammo and was obviously going nuts. So I think in my desire not to have the gun nut side have this story, I decided that in my world, I wanted the the doctor's gun to have been the instrument that killed the woman who was standing there. And I want to apologize for letting my biases run wild there, because it turns out that, in fact, the NRA crowd now has a really good story that buttresses their point of view that if we all just arm ourselves, everything will be okay. Okay. Now, back to, I'm forever interrupting myself. So now back to this. There is also a story in the news. We have not talked about it. I don't know how much you maybe are aware of it, but it has to do with a gynecologist in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins who apparently over the course of a quarter century, he was there for a quarter century, while he was doing gynecological exams on women, he had like a little camera attached to his, yeah, you heard about this? And so, anyway, they finally a nurse noticed the camera or something and alerted authorities, who searched his computer and found that he had thousands of videos of, women's vaginas on his home computer. First of all, you got to wonder. He spends his days looking up women's vaginas. Why would he need to take pictures and take them home? That struck me as odd. But then, so some of the women, and the women didn't know, and also, no image of, okay, here is the interior of some woman's nether regions. But there was never any identifier as to whose vaginal landscape you're looking at. So it's just all these anonymous pictures of vaginas. Anyway, as soon as it became known that he was doing that, the ambulance chasers came running and started signing up women who had been his patients for suits, which were later joined together in a class action suit. And the settlement, this thing, he committed suicide, by the way. The women will share a $190 million, okay, let's round that up to $200 million, the court said, that Johns Hopkins, did you ever wonder why the S is on there? Because you just want to say John Hopkins. It's Johns Hopkins will pay out to this doc's former patients whose genitals might, in fact, have been some of those photographed. And the women get the money because they were victimized by him. And they were traumatized by him. They were emotionally, violated. I gotta say, I don't get it. If some gynecologist I went to turned out to be some nutcase like this, who had photographed my privates, along with the privates of all the other women. And then I found out that one of those pictures or some of those videos were of me. Now, granted, not me in any recognizable form, but me. I feel like violated, but I don't see how that... I don't get how that becomes so emotionally traumatic. I really don't get it. I don't get it. Jess? Would you feel like would you be like need of psychiatric help after something like that happened? Would you feel if somebody you didn't know but somebody had taken a picture of your genitalia and without your knowledge and had it on his, computer at home, are you then do you have pain and suffering?
No.
Jess does not either.
Whatever.
Yeah, right. Especially if, you're one of thousands. You just have...
Yeah. It's not like he can even distinguish.
No, what does he know? Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I got a feeling. It's just, he's into whatever. I personally, I don't get it. So listen. So women don't know if they were personally photographed. But they're coming through the woodwork. Now there's 190 million that's going to be divvied up. Any woman in the past 25 years who ever saw this guy, there's already 8,000 women who have signed up saying, I went to him. One of those vaginas must be mine. What's that worth? Few thou? 20 thou? Oh, I suffered. Ever since I heard about it, I've been distraught. One woman signed up, and she's quoted in the Associated Press as saying she couldn't remember if she ever saw the doctor, but she says, I could have. And if I did, he should have to pay for what he did to me. So now they've got to divvy up the award to all the women who say that they were traumatized by this doctor. And it turns out that they're going to have to state how they were traumatized. It says here, the money will not be divided equally. Some women would be entitled to much more if their trauma, I guess he sexually abused some. Okay, yeah, fine. That's a different story. Others who shook off their trauma might get nothing at all. So in other words, if a woman is like a more sort of like, all right, he photographed my vagina, screw it, I don't know, what's that worth? I mean, so who cares? She gets nothing. But if she's a creature that easily falls apart, my vagina, she gets $50,000. Well, why? I mean, well, of course, you don't know. I think this is the weirdest case I've ever gotten. So every patient of his qualifies for the suit, but they have to have been in some way damaged. It says here some women who have maybe gotten over the shock in the year and a half since this guy was found out might think it's not worth their trouble to go down and try to explain to somebody how they're traumatized. That in it of itself would be more traumatic than the initial violation. But for, I don't know, but for a few thou, you might do that. And so, as I said, 8,000 women have already signed up. And it's possible that as many as 4,000 more might. So I think a lot of women are probably thinking, oh, God, I hope I saw this guy. What was his name again? What was his name? The only one we know is really making out are the ambulance chasers, who, of course, will get 35% of that 190. You do the math. But I don't get, if it was just a picture with no identifier, I don't think that's worth much of anything. I mean, in terms of emotional trauma to me, I see where you can't allow that kind of thing, but I'm sorry, I don't get it. I don't quite get it. I don't know what that's about. I'm glad, Jess, you're reacting like I am. But then again, maybe it's like Friday and I'm not quite understanding the whole whatever. Okay, so, okay, you guys, you remember the time thing. Here it is. No, that's not it. I don't remember the words, but mathematically it makes sense. 16 years old to a kid who is 8 is 100% of his life. When you are 80, becoming 88 is only 10% of your life. Is that what it was? It was just that, so then you just deal with those 8 years. If you're 80, 8 years is, yeah, it's like this, just 10, right. That might have been it. That was it. Thank you. David says, when I was in school, a teacher said something like, time is relative to what you are doing. If you are sitting on a hot stove, that's true. A minute will seem like an hour, but if you're sitting next to a pretty girl, an hour will seem like a minute. Being a smart ass, I raised my hand and asked, what if you're sitting on a hot stove next to a pretty girl? Yeah. And he ended up in detention, no doubt. But talking to my friends the other day about this, we came up with, I guess, studies show that an object, things are so weird, perception is so strange, that an object observed, by observing an object, you change the object. By observing an action, you can, I can't even, I hang out with people smarter than me, and I don't follow the conversation, so I give up. But things ain't always what they seem. Laura writes of this particular vaginal class action suit, how ridiculous. The women most likely won't get anything. That's the lawyers. That's right. The lawyers are the only ones who get anything in a class action suit. That is so true. Haven't you ever been told you're eligible to join a class action suit? I have. A million times. You get all excited. You get, ho. That's the first time. And then when like some huge amount is awarded, you get $6.22.
Not me.
You didn't even get that?
I got $1,800.
You got $1,800?
Yeah.
What was the class action? You're kidding.
When I was in high school, I went to the mall one day, and someone from Abercrombie & Fitch approached me and was like, do you want a job? And I said, sure. I had nothing else to do. I mean, I had a job, but I was like, yeah, I can take another job. So I think I was 18. I was a senior. And then I worked for a while, and then they were like, so we're going to need you to straighten your hair for your shifts, and you need some color, so, you need to go tanning. And I was like, you can kiss my ass. So then they started, weaning me off the schedule, and then I just,
So you sort of lost the job?
Yeah, without them actually having to fire me. They just, I didn't have shifts, and then I was just on call all the time, and I was like, whatever. And then a few months later, it was, some sort of, huge discrimination
I remember, but they would only hire certain people who looked a certain way.
Right. And so I just filled out the forms because I said, whatever. And then I got the check.
And you got that, okay. Wow.
Woohoo!
Woo! Yeah, Laura writes, I once got $1.12 in a class action. And she also says, if somebody took a Polaroid of her private parts, wanted to look at them, fine. I don't care. As long as whatever. It just doesn't feel like that much of a... Okay, Ray writes, I often laughed with friends after very private, invasive surgeries that as long as I don't remember it, I don't care if the doctors did a puppet show with my junk. You know they do. I have heard they do all kinds of things to you when you're out. They make fun of your body. They like, blah, blah, blah. That does happen. That pisses me off. I wonder if I was an overweight person used in those news stories about obesity as some faceless example waddling down the street. Could I sue now? You know, all TV stations have these... although at some point, a photographer is told, hey, go downtown and shoot fat people. But of course, shoot fat butts, shoot big pot bellies. But if that's local and you're watching and you know what you were wearing that day and you see your fat butt walking, I wonder if I would feel much more violated about that. Anyway, Ray says, I don't think hurt feelings are the same as damaged nerves. Right. I swear, maybe there's something in the story I'm not getting. I mean, maybe the doctor, clearly they say that if somebody actually was assaulted by him. But if somebody actually been assaulted by him, they would know that, and then they would have brought, I don't understand. I don't, this is my beef with the media now. They keep telling me stories and not really telling me the whole damn story. So I'm left with all kinds of fill in the blanks myself. Which, in the case of the gun-toting psychiatrist, you know, I filled in incorrectly. Oh. So anyway, speaking of the horrors of the world, there was a sort of a reporter's op-ed-y piece in the New York Times today, and I can't even tell you what reporter it was, because I failed to bring in. I just brought in the jump, you know. Anyway, he's asking the question that now that there's all this horror in the world, and we often refer to how Vietnam was the first war that came into our living rooms. And because it came into our living rooms, that did fuel the public's, first of all, involvement, awareness, and then desire to have our government get the hell out of there. But today, it is literally an immediate thing, so that all those reporters who have fanned out into the Middle East now, into Ukraine, into wherever the latest horror is, they're not only covering it in the old-fashioned kind of a way, but they're tweeting in real time their reactions, what they see. They're taking pictures of what they see. And so if something horrible happens around the world and is observed by a reporter now with an iPhone, bango, you're there in real time. So we are now on the receiving end of almost immediate war video, war photo, horror video, horror photo. A plane crashes, not to worry. You can be right there sifting through the debris with the sifters. The question the reporter's asking is, what does this do to our heads? What does this do to our hearts? What does this do to our ability to react? And he quotes Susan Sontag, who was talking about war being seductive. And speaking of how the pictures of horror are powerful. But then she goes on to say, and this was before Twitter she's writing this, so you can ratchet up whatever remark she makes here. Globalizing suffering may spur people to feel they ought to care more. But it also invites them to feel that the suffering and the misfortunes are just too vast, too irrevocable, too epic for them to even do anything. So in that regard, paralyzing, but also guilt-inducing. I'm doing nothing, and look what's happening. The fear is that a constant onslaught of images like this desensitizes us. That's the fear a lot of people have. And I don't know the questions that arise now. So that now that war comes to us, if we choose, in real time, do we feel more empowered and a part of it in a positive way? Or do we feel more helpless? Do we care more? Does it punch our empathy buttons? Or does it do the exact opposite by inundating us with so much that we become desensitized? If human suffering just becomes, well, here's how the reporter puts it. If we come to the point where, you're just clicking through your tweets and some video of horror and human suffering is part of the scroll that includes a video of your niece twerking, does it just join then into, I don't know, like kind of a real-time wallpaper? I think there is no doubt it has some impact. It has impact. Whether we feel if it inures us to suffering, that's an impact. It's a bad one. If it rouses us to action, I would think that's a good one. If it makes us so that it's just part, it's not abnormal anymore. Remember the power of the picture of that little naked Vietnamese girl running toward the camera. That one image probably did more to bring Americans and put Americans against the war than any other. But in today, is one image able to be that powerful anymore? Caller, go ahead.
Yes, Clarence from Canonsburg.
Clarence from Canonsburg, hi.
I would think this inundation of images and all that stuff does both things.
It does both.
It does. Some of it calls some of us to action, and some of us, it desensitizes us. It depends on who you are.
Right.
And I'll go to the wings, the wings of thought, the right and the left. They tend, like I said last week, to get roused to action with all this stuff. They will pick whatever
images,
and inundated with,
right,
and be roused to action.
Right.
And then some of us, and I think I fall into this category, I'm just like, wow, look at all this stuff, and I can't do nothing about it. Well, you're, not
but
just
doesn't
war.
it? Wait.
Huh?
So I sort of felt that way today. I felt overwhelmed by what I was reading in the paper about people right here in my community, and then and then Israel and Gaza, and then Ukraine, and blah blah blah. And I just felt, yes, exactly. I felt so depressed that I didn't want to get out of bed. And I said to myself, you're alive. You damn well better get out of bed. Look at all, I was trying to make myself feel like you have the privilege of an okay existence. How dare you sit here all blah, blah, blah. But I had to fight with myself because of my knowledge of the suffering that's going on in so many others' lives. I think it's guilt-inducing, frankly.
And that's when I hit I go to the math. You look at all these others in the Ukraine and in Israel and Gaza and Syria and wherever you want to go. And you think, well, actually there are, like 7 billion people on the planet. So the numbers, there really aren't that many people suffering. That's how I trick my brain into doing it.
Because they're not covering.
Trick.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's actually. So, in other words, all the people who are living their lives and are relatively, they got the normal problems of a human being.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people on the globe at any given moment are doing okay.
They're doing fine. And it's like that thing, man bites dog. That's news. We're not going to hear about, the Boy Scout who crossed a little lady across the street. That's not news.
No.
But that kind of stuff's going on all the time. You just don't. You're never going to hear about it. You just have to. Like I said, I know it's a brain trick for myself. I know I'm tricking myself into, not being depressed and feeling like the world is hopeless. But that's just how I do it. Those good little things that are happening all the time that you never hear about.
That's a good thing. That's a good trick, and I thank you for sharing it.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to remember it.
Well, if you really pay attention, you'll see it all the time. Just like somebody holding a door open for somebody. That's that little gesture. Those small little things, and you start multiplying that by the billions of them that's going on. There's more good in the world.
Absolutely.
That's how like I said, I know it's a brain trick.
But it's thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
You helped me. Okay. Well, now let me try to depress you again. I just want to refer back to this series that the Post-Gazette is doing on access to health care for poor people in our area. And, man, this is an eye-opener. This is an eye-opener, and it makes you ashamed. I'm sorry, and there's no way. These people are not halfway around the world. I'm looking at pictures of people right here. I could bump into one of them when I walk out the door here. I ride the bus with people like this. And I'm ashamed. I am ashamed. It's hard not to be when you read this. And the headline in yesterday's paper, the Sunday paper, was that in Pittsburgh, the safety net has fallen apart. And they flat out explain how all these hospitals work to avoid treating poor patients. I think it's the mayor of Braddock, Fetterman, who is quoted as saying, "You go broke treating broke people." And then, of course, you remember that the reason that these behemoths, the UPMCs of the world, pay no taxes, no property taxes, is because they have this nonprofit charitable exemption. And then you read the reality. of their charity. And as I said, you feel anger and you feel shame. This piece points out, so often you read a story here, you read a story there, but nobody is pulling it all together. This is what this kind of a series is attempting to do, and I think does an excellent job from what I can see of the first 2 installments, and there is nothing better for you to read, believe me, because this is our backyard. This is our house that is being described. So rather than get worked up about something a million miles away, how's about we turn our attention and any energies we do have to fixing this? In the first 10 years of this millennia, this area lost 25% of its hospitals. A quarter of its hospitals. There were 39 hospitals in 2000. There are 11 fewer now. That's a ton of hospitals that don't exist. They went down, they got gobbled up, they were ripped down. So often the case, especially those in poor neighborhoods. So that Braddock Hospital doesn't even exist. It wasn't just shuttered. It was demolished. That's a poor community. Aliquippa Hospital, poor community, gone. And on and on and on. And the hospitals that have gone are the hospitals that serve the poor. Because back to Fetterman, hey man, you don't make any money. I mean, you go broke if your clients are broke. So who the hell wants to do that? And then the people who do note this stuff say, look at a St. Francis hospital. St. Francis was the hospital that was known to take care, charitably, of people with mental health problems. That's gone. Mercy Providence Hospital. That was one of the few hospitals that really provided charity care. Really provided it. Gone. Southside Hospital. It's gone. Braddock, Aliquippa, as I said, gone, 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 gone. And none of them are in neighborhoods where people have a lot of money. So hospitals actively seek to avoid poor patients. For that alone, I would get rid of their charitable exemption. Sorry. Their only reason for not having to pay those property taxes is they're supposed to be providing care to poor people. Excuse me. All these Catholic hospitals that are gone, St. Francis Central, St. Francis Medical Center, Mercy Providence, they were routinely among the largest providers of uncompensated care. And the nun who was the last head of St. Francis Health System, when it got gobbled up by UPMC, said the problem we had was always money. Now, this bespeaks a system that doesn't work. we have a healthcare system that works for people with money and sort of works for people in between and doesn't work much at all for people who are poor. Listen to what happens to you. I think I read that UPMC just stopped doing this because of the attention given it. But let's say you're a poor, you got nothing, and you end up in you're struck by a bus, and you're taken to the UPMC hospital, and you're treated. Because they haven't gotten to the point where they literally throw you back out onto the street. You're treated, but you get a bill. And because you're not insured, you get the bill like I got. Remember $40,000 to be treated in the ER? Right? $40,000? You don't have 40 cents. You don't pay it. You can't pay it. Do you know what UPMC has been doing? I'll read it right here. Routinely reported patients to credit bureaus. So they will take those poor people and sick credit agencies on them. Isn't that charitable? Nationally, this is not a practice. Hospitals don't do that. It says here it is rare nationally, although 9 hospitals in the Pittsburgh area routinely go after poor people for money that they don't have. Hound them. Terrify them. They also don't put on their websites any information about financial assistance. These are the hospitals here. So often a comparison is helpful. So in one of the pieces Sean Hamill writes, he tells us about 2 hospitals, very much alike, 2 huge systems. The Cleveland Clinic, hell of a reputation. Cleveland Clinic, UPMC, not a hell of a reputation. UPMC, $10 billion healthcare giant. They closed Braddock Hospital in that poor community in 2010. Cleveland Clinic, also a huge healthcare giant, but not as big as UPMC, closed one of its hospitals, Huron Hospital, in 2011. Both hospitals served overwhelmingly poor populations. Here's the difference. Let's remind ourselves what UPMC did when they bulldozed Braddock Hospital. They left behind a small, struggling community health center, a dental clinic that operates out of a retrofitted RV a couple of days a week, a family social services center, and 1 van for getting people within an approximately 2-mile radius of Braddock to healthcare facilities. Braddock officials begged UPMC, please, just put an urgent care center here. Please, just put an urgent care center here. UPMC declined. Okay, let's look at what Cleveland Clinic did. Same kind of thing. Closed down a hospital in a poor community. Here's what they did after they closed that hospital. They built a $25 million, 50,000 square foot health center adjacent to the hospital's former location. It expanded beyond primary care to add some specialties like an express care center and navigation teams and a pharmacy and a dialysis center and behavioral health services and a kitchen to teach healthy cooking and an expanded transportation system with 10 vans for a door-to-door service for anyone within 5 miles of the original location of the hospital. When I rail and rant about UPMC, I'm standing on some very solid ground. The administration of UPMC is about as vile an operation as exists, masquerading as one thing while being another. If corporations are people, then UPMC is that most extraordinary of people. It's a person that somehow exists without a heart. But man, what a bank account it's got. So just take a moment to remember that what happened in Braddock could have happened in Cleveland, but it did not. And the difference was UPMC wasn't operating in Cleveland. And so all of those poor people who lost their hospital there got something almost like one back. They were not just abandoned. There is so much stuff in this article. Please, please, please read it. And back to what Clarence had said, you read about this stuff and you want to tear your hair out, but in the course of reading it, you see the people in our community who are trying. And oh my God, there are saints among us. There are doctors who live the creed. There are doctors. Dr. Bill Markle being one. This guy, he's beyond retirement age. He works his tail off. Volunteers, doesn't get paid, to try to bring health care to struggling people in McKees Rocks, in the Mon Valley. He came up the hard way. He's a Mon Valley guy. He worked in the steel mills to make the money to put himself through college and medical school. And you look at the people who run these free clinics. They offer free care to uninsured patients. He tried to get UPMC to partner with him. They would not. They gave him some furniture. They gave him a few cast-offs. You got to read this. And then when you're done reading it, make sure some right-winger, sees it, some Republican, some fat cat who thinks, why don't they just work? Why don't they? There's a whole piece today on how they don't have any transportation. Let's say they finally get a doctor who will see them. They can't get there. This assumption that people who are doing just fine, thank you, have of how others live. They cannot conceive, I guess. Maybe they don't want to. Anyway, please, please, please go online if you don't have the paper. I understand the desire to dodge these kinds of stories, but don't. Really a brilliant job. I thank you. And this is the kind of stuff that once all the newspapers of the world go out of business, you're not going to see. Melanie writes, I recently got in the mail from UPMC a solicitation to donate to their charitable work. My initial reaction was to laugh. Then I got angry. How much nerve does it take to send something like that out? And, unfortunately, you got to figure they must get enough response to justify sending out requests like that. You bet they do. The idea of somebody like UPMC going begging, rattling their tin cup, here, would you please help me? It takes your breath away. Here's some good news. So, you know, the NCAA and the universities are under fire right now because really, I think you can mostly thank this, my alma mater, Northwestern University's football team and its quarterback a few years back for organizing and attempting to unionize. And they brought their case to the National Labor Relations Board. And this got a lot of press, and then questions started being asked, and reality started being explored. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, fearful that they are going to start losing all the filthy lucre they get from exploiting these young athletes, who they set up rules that say, and that athlete we're exploiting, he can't get a penny, and if he does, well, we'll throw him out. Indiana University, all by itself, the other day announced a Bill of Rights for its athletes. Listen to their Bill of Rights. Free tuition for life.
What?
Uh-huh. Now, why would a university do that if they didn't think that those student athletes have a case? Indiana University, all by itself. Free tuition for life. Southern California, all by itself, says it will now guarantee a 4-year scholarship. Not what they do now is 1 year, year to year. 4-year scholarship for any of its athletes. Guess what the NCAA decided last week? it no longer is going to be asking the athletes, the student athletes, to sign a statement, which they've all had to sign in the past, that authorized the NCAA to use their likenesses, to use their names, to use them in any way they so deemed for promotional purposes. That means an athlete can say to the NCAA or to his university, no, you're not putting me on that cover. No. I mean, if apparently I'm going to be hauling in millions of dollars from your alums if you do this, pay me. Anyway, Indiana's athletic director says this by way of explanation for all of a sudden all this generosity. It would be silly to suggest this isn't a product of the environment now of people looking more closely at the benefits afforded student athletes. Gotta love them troublemakers. Let's hear it for the Northwestern Wildcats. Okay, that's it for today. I thank you very much. My sister Susan, tomorrow I'm going to ask her if somebody took a picture of her vaginal area, whether she thinks she'd be traumatized. I have not asked her that. We'll ask her. Okay? You have a wonderful day, and talk at you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.